Right, I think we've got a bit more to talk about this week. Hey there guys, I'm Will, welcome to FP1 and the Comedy Review, the series that's jokes hit harder than Stingray Rob hits the wall every week. Now it may be hard to believe, but the IndyCar season is almost at a close, and with just 4 rounds left to run, it was time for the sport to return to its home, the Indianapolis Motor Speedway. What followed was a crazy weekend from start to finish, kicking off before the cars had even hit the track. So let's cover the news. Friday brought with it some big news surrounding Meyershank Racing. The team confirmed that they were putting Helio Castroneves into a care home this week, with Tom Blomqvist returning to the IndyCar fold full-time from 2024. Simon Pagenaud was taking yet another weekend to recover from his Mid-Ohio crash, and back in the number 60 was Linus Tech Tips over here, whose career I covered in a separate video earlier this week. That's not even a subtle plug, the video tanks, so some love on it would be massively appreciated. Now of course there was one more, arguably even bigger story in the IndyCar paddock, and while it technically all kicked off on race day, it makes more sense to cover it now. And that's the news that Alex Palou has changed his mind again. I'll be honest, when I read the news that Palou had snubbed yet another IndyCar contract, I was kind of frustrated, and after everything that kicked off at the back end of 2022, I just didn't care anymore. Just in case you've been living under a rock for the last 12 months, last season it was rumoured that Alex Palou would be off to McLaren, until Kingpin here turned around and said something along the lines of, "I don't think so." The Chip Ganassi team, as a result, went to take their own driver to court mid-season, until at some point Palou turned around and said they were all happy families again. But he was still jetting off to McLaren for 2024. 1 year later, Palou has changed his tune yet again, ditching McLaren and his management company to presumably stay with the Ganassi fold into the long term. The whole palaver has made McLaren act like the age of one of their average fans, all the while the bosses over at Alpine are wetting themselves in the distance. I really don't know who's in the right anymore, but as I said earlier, I don't care, so let's get on to practice 1. This session, the only one before qualifying I might add, ended with a surprise at the top of the table in the form of RLL's Graham Rahal. Benjamin Pedersen was also struggling to drive, though we're more used to that. Pedersen, in fact, despite coming back to a track he's driven in IndyCar before, was making more of a hash of it than he usually does. Pato O'Ward was also in trouble, not that the commentators seemed to care. For whatever reason, they'd picked up a grass fetish over the week off.
Into the beautiful grass here.
I mean, you can get on that grass, and maybe if the grass is a little bit wet.
Don't often see them. This is the smoothest grass.
It's the smoothest grass, I'll give you that. I'll no argument there.
I mean, look at that. That thing looks like a putting green.
It's like a gust of green right there.
Anyway, we'll move on to qualifying, and this would be a very important session for championship contender Joseph Newgarden. Trailing in the standings by a country mile, the American needed a good result here. So let's see how he gets on, never mind he's gone out in round 1. Newgarden would be the first of several shocks in qualifying, with Power, Herter, Kirkwood and Dixon failing to even get into the fast 12. Then Devlin DiFrancesco shot to the top, and I began to question the reality around me. That P1 from Devlin would be no fluke either. The Canadian would then book himself a place in the fast 6, as Rahal and Lundgaard provisionally locked out the front row. Nah, sorry, have one of you drugged me or something? This is ridiculous now. If you were the likes of Grosjean, Rossi or O'Ward, you must have been laughing about now. You'd be thinking the fast 6 was actually just a fast 3. And in fairness, after that it was. Though neither of those 3 would be in it. Come the end of qualifying, the provisional front row stayed as it was, as Graham Rahal, at the site where he was a blubbering mess on Indy 500 bump day, took pole position. Surely this weekend cannot get any crazier. As it turned out, oh yes it could. Now we'll get to that, but first we have another practice session to cover. This was topped by Dixon, who must have been wondering where this pace was a few hours earlier. Other drivers still seemed a bit in the dark though, Marcus Ericsson trying to go quicker just by taking the oval layout instead. After the ridiculousness we'd seen so far, Arenas VK wasn't even sure what category he was in, as it looked like he'd set his IndyCar up for a Formula Drift session every time he went into turn 1. We would be focusing on neither of those as the cars lined up for the green flag, as all of our attention was devoted to one man and one man only.
Let's go racing in Indy. This is the Gallagher Grand Prix, and Graham Rahal with a great start. Lundgaard is being challenged on the inside.
3 behind, 3 wide. You see both McLarens now 4 by Devlin DiFrancesco, baby, all the way to the lead from his career best start. He's side by side with Rahal, and Dev takes the point.
Unbelievable.
Now I can't begin to work out how Devlin did that, so I'm just going to put it down to obvious doping. So as Devlin DiFrancesco shot off into the lead, still can't believe I'm saying that, there was chaos behind. Alex Palou embracing his new Ganassi contract by punting around his teammate, prompting Newgarden to just give up on the championship and have an affair with Marcus Armstrong. At the same time, Dixon was spun around, and Grosjean decided he just wanted to be the cuck and watch Armstrong and Newgarden go at it. Rather unsurprisingly, the pace car was out, and we wouldn't be ready to race again until 6 laps later.
And we don't get to say this very often. It's Devlin DiFrancesco in the Andretti Steinbrenner Autosport Honda leading the way over Graham Rahal.
Yeah, I'm still not over the fact this happened. Would be brought back to reality soon enough. As Devlin's drugs wore out, he dropped further and further down the field, eventually ending the race in 20th place, despite there being no calamities on his end whatsoever. This race has somehow managed to make him look even worse. Jesus Christ. So as the RLL cars re-inherited the lead, the shocks would continue, as Stingray Rob managed to get himself into the top 5. Now I get some cars had pitted, but this is still impressive stuff. And what's even more impressive was how he was able to tweet at me while still driving the car. Back to the real world then, and everything was looking rather dandy for Rahal, Letterman, Lanigan. They held a comfortable 1-2 by the halfway point, though we're now coming up to lap traffic, including Benjamin Pedersen, who through some feat of nature had managed to go 4 laps down already. Luckily, Pedersen peeled off into the pits before we could cause any more damage. Further down the field, though not quite as far down as Pedersen here, Scott Dixon came into the pits, and to begin with, no one paid much attention. And then we realised he was going to the end. And then we realised he'd managed to cycle his way up to the very front of the pack. Rahal would box from the lead with 23 laps to go, and whilst up to this point the win had looked to be his on the plate, now things weren't looking so certain. The American had an 8-second gap to close, though Dixon in the lead was conserving both fuel and tyres. Backmarkers in the way weren't making Graham's day any easier as well. With 4 tours to go, the gap was down to 1.3 seconds. With 2 laps, it was 0.3 seconds, and by the white flag, Rahal was right on Dixon's tail. Could he end his 6-year winless drought, or would Dixon go from last to first and claim his first win on the year? At the end of 85 laps, it would be Dixon crossing the line in first place. You know, for a race that saw no cautions besides the mating session on the opening lap, that was pretty bloody amazing. Scott's win propels him now into P2 in the championship, and I don't know about you guys, but that kind of surprised me. I was under the impression he was having a bit of a subpar year, though really he's just been quiet and consistent all season long. Bit like Pedersen here, except he's just been consistently shit. As for Rahal, I'm sure he's gutted, and you know what, fair enough. That race looked to be his for a lot of the time. But he's got to be buoyed by the form his team have found over the course of this 2023 season. Next up, IndyCar heads to World Ride Technology Raceway for the last oval race of the year, and presumably the last chance for Joseph Newgarden to have some form in 2023. You can bet I'll be covering that race too, so if you enjoyed the comedy review, be sure to get subscribed for all of that. A huge thank you has to go out to all of my patrons and channel members as well. And if you'd like to support the channel further and get early access to a few of my videos, then you can check those options out via the links in the description below. For now though, that's all from me, so I'll see you very soon with another video, but until then, have a good one.